Welcome everybody to a very special video. I was lucky enough to have Niamh and the Prog Nerd on today's episode. I was on her channel last week, and so she gets to be on mine this week. Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm really excited to be here. Actually, um,
Excellent.
I'm a big fan of double albums, and I'm also a big fan of your channel actually myself. So
Oh,
it's
thank you.
actually really fun to be on here.
Excellent, excellent. And if you haven't already subscribed or watched any of her videos, please do. She is amazing and a massive rising star. So, yeah, all good things to your way. Excellent. Well, super stoked to have you on and talk about some double albums. So that's what this video is all about. We're talking about some of our favorite double albums. These are albums that, upon release, came in two discs because there's a lot of albums that have come out since CDs have come around that could essentially fill up two records. So to make everything even, the original release had to have been on two discs. So I've got my list in front of me. I'm sure you've got your list in front of you.
I do, yes.
We've got 5 albums, and we haven't told one another what our albums are. So we're just going to go back and forth and kind of talk about them. So I'll let you do the honors of taking the first album.
Awesome. Oh, this is difficult. I can pick absolutely anything right now.
Anything you want.
I'll go for this one. So I'm gonna pick Tales from Topographic.
Ooh.
Yes, this is 1973, I believe.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I love this album so much, and I think the first time I heard it, I just didn't get it at all. It was one of those ones that was like had this really broad concept that I had no idea anything about, and the music and everything, and 20 minutes each song, and there's only 4 tracks on the album itself. It really bizarred me at first, but I it's going to be one of my favorite Yes albums, and it's a great album. It's got so much great material, and just the musicianship's absolutely great, of
Yeah,
course.
and it's actually one of mine, so I'll start talking about that as
Awesome.
well. I kind of figured that there would be a lot of cross contamination within this. Yes, it is either my second or third favorite Yes album. It kind of wavers between the two. Even though it's the first album without Bill Bruford on it, because he's my favorite drummer of all time, it's still like the concept about it, the actual musicianship. And I know we were talking about this a little bit last week on your channel, but like the amount of time that was needed to really get into a lot of the different themes and concepts. It took me a
Yeah.
long time. Like I've matured with this album
Mhm.
because like at first it was just kind of the first track and the second track that I was really into and didn't
Yeah.
really care for the other ones. Then I just fell in love with Ritual, and that might have just been Yes shows when they do it live.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
It brings it to a whole other concept. So yeah, I love the album, and I think it's I think it's probably their Yes's most mature work. Um,
I can get behind that.
maybe not necessarily their best, but like it's only beaten out by like one or two other albums.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, as you said, Bill Bruford's also one of my favorite drummers, and you can actually hear the difference between their
Mm-hmm.
playing throughout, something like, the Yes album versus something like this. Of course, they're two
Yeah.
completely different albums, two
Mm-hmm.
different sounds in a way,
Mm-hmm.
but both are absolutely fantastic. I'm actually quite a big fan of Alan White.
Oh, same. Like I love Alan White. There's nothing against him. Like I love his work that he did with George Harrison and all of his works,
Wow.
but there's just this I don't know, untethered talent that Bill brings to it. Not to say that Alan doesn't. It's just a different expression. I feel like
Yeah.
he's much more of an atmospheric drummer.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, as you say, Alan White's done like other stuff with, he was on Imagine by John Lennon. He's
Hmm.
done a lot of that kind of stuff. And then you've got Bill Bruford, who's primarily a progressive rock drummer who's worked with all these different prog bands as well.
Yeah. I think that's the difference between like a pop drummer and like a jazz drummer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. So I can go on to one of my first ones, and oh, I didn't know I can use props. I wonder if I can find it in my. I have the list, but let's see here. Okay. Give me a second. Let's see. Ah, there it is. Okay. So the first one I have is Tommy.
Oh, yeah, that's a great album.
So this was one of my loves when I was in high school. This is one of the things that actually got me into progressive rock. The whole concept of Tommy, the whole story of Tommy, and the interludes and how they blend tracks together. I mean, this was released like what, late 60s?
Yeah.
So like progressive rock wasn't even really a thing then. They were just doing music without labels or preconceptions of what music should be, but how they're weaving the story throughout it. And I just, everything about this album I love.
Yeah, no, that is a fantastic album. I'm a big fan of The Who as well. I think my favorite of theirs is probably The Who's Next or Quadrophenia, which is also great proggy kind of album.
Yeah.
Tommy was one of the first Who albums that we actually got into our collection, and both me and my dad are massive fans of the album.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I agree. Like I love Quadrophenia. I love that story. I just there's a little, I don't know. There's too many dips and dives within that album. Like there are single tracks on Quadrophenia that I love more than any of the individual tracks found on Tommy. But I just feel as like a consecutive, continuous listen, I'll go to Tommy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going back to drumming again. I'm a big Keith Moon fan. So
yeah, how can you not?
keep it wrong.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So what's your next album?
I'm probably gonna go with safe choice here, and I think it's gonna not gonna be very shocking, but Pink Floyd, The Wall.
Okay.
Gonna make my list. Actually, not my favorite Pink Floyd album, but it's up there with my favorite. It took a long time for me to kind of get this album. Again, it took me a while to get them because I was really into things like metal. Like I was into like the early Pink Floyd before I got into like Dark Side of the Moon and beyond that. So when I listened to The Wall, because my dad's not really much of a fan of The Wall, he always kind of used to say, "Oh, it's all right," but I decided to give it a listen for myself, and I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
Just everything about it. I know a lot of people think, "Well, this is just very self-indulgent, Roger Waters being self-indulgent, whatever," but it's still a fantastic album.
Yeah, you can be self-indulgent but still create fantastic music.
Exactly, and that's my opinion on Roger Waters, really.
Yeah.
But this has got, Comfortably Numb, and I mean, the opener, In the Flesh.
In the Flesh, yeah.
Such a great opener, and of course, things like Hey You and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love The Wall. I grew up with The Wall. It took me, much like yourself, it took me a while to actually get into The Wall because when I was a teenager, I did not like The Wall. I like actively bashed against it. And a lot of that also had to do with kind of like where I was and what there's like a saying that says when you see yourself in a work of art, um, you either gravitate towards it or you rage against it. And I think I was more of the raging against it. So yeah, it took me a while. It's still not my favorite Pink Floyd album by a far stretch. Like I'm more in their psychedelic era.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's still a fantastic album for sure.
It's amazing. I mean, I think that all of them were just not really, they kind of passed their musical peak, but they were still kind of on it.
Yeah, the drive was still very much alive.
Yeah.
You
can feel the tension between the band members throughout the album.
There's a little bit of tension there, yeah, for sure.
But overall, great album.
Yeah. So the next one that I have is this one. Here we go. So this is Arcade Fire with their album, The Reflektor.
I've heard of the group, yeah.
Yeah, this is their fourth album, and it was released through 2 discs. And I love it. It's very, very proggy for them. It's probably their proggiest piece. They have a number of tracks that are into the 7 and 8 minutes on it. They actually have David Bowie coming in to help out with some of the vocal works on the title track. Yeah, it deals with some pretty heavy concepts of what does it mean to be human? Who are we when we see ourselves reflected in somebody else? What does it mean to be a normal person? Like it kind of wraps up a lot of the themes that like The Wall and Tommy present in a little bit more of a distilled package. And they cover quite a number of different musical expressions. Like there are some moments on here like Joan of Arc that almost feel punkish, while having other areas like the title track or a perfect symmetry being much more of like a vaporwave synthwave track.
Yeah.
So it's a fantastic art project, and they're by a Canadian band. And being Canadian, I always like to toot my own horn a little bit. So yeah, if you haven't listened to it yet, this is a great starting point for the indie rockers from Canada.
Yeah, that concept. Wow, I'm already interested by. You mentioned David Bowie and that concept. Wow, that's amazing. I'm
Yeah.
definitely now.
Yeah, it's fantastic and phenomenal. A lot of people don't like it because of how experimental it was. They're like, oh, I like the indie darling. I like their more homegrown garage band kind of things. I don't like all these symphonic soundscapes that they're trying. But for me, I'm like, yes, more of that, please.
I mean, I love when bands like that will just whip out something like this.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, let's go experimental and do something that we've never done before.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Perfect. Your next album.
Works Volume 1.
Oh, I forgot that was a double discer. Oh man.
This is one of my this album really has grown on me a lot, because there's like bits in the middle that I used to kind of think, I'm not really much of a fan of it. For me, my favorite part of this album is the piano concerto
Mm-hmm.
that opens the album. That is just, and it's all, composed and written by Keith Emerson. And I just thought, wow, like that is, it's just a classical piece. It's
It
beyond
is.
prog at this point. It's just absolutely amazing. And I just love the variation of this album, because you got like the kind of the Greg Lake songs, with like kind of romantic melancholy kind of sound, and then you've got like the classical elements of the Keith Emerson, and then ending with fanfare for the common man, which is just absolutely great for music. I think everyone can agree with that. This is definitely one of my favorite double albums.
Yeah. I love how like the concept of this album, where each member of the band had a different face of the album, and then they came together as a group to create these two brilliant tracks. Like Pirates is one of my favorite ELP tracks to date. I basically made a like a CD mix based on pirate tracks, just to have that on a CD for it.
Okay.
And I love the instrumental that is the fanfare for the common man, especially when they play it live and they push it into like the 20 minutes.
Yeah, I love that as well.
Yeah, it's such a great track. I would probably put it more in their weaker side of the catalog, because I mean they followed up Brain Salad Surgery, which is a travesty. Like, how do you follow up a masterpiece like that with anything?
Parker's trilogy, Brain
Right? Like they came off of these like 4 to 5 album streaks, and then there was really nowhere to go. So on the one hand, it was a little bit of a disappointment, but as an album, as an actual product, it's still really, really great and beautiful.
Yeah, I as I said, it just really grew on me eventually. I know a lot of people aren't really much of a fan of the kind of post Brain Salad Surgery ELP stuff, but I really like this. It's got some great songs on it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of my favorite Amazon Like Apartment songs.
Yeah, I love C'est La Vie. Yeah, and then I believe they followed it up with Works Volume 2, which has, I believe, in Father Christmas on it.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I mean, that particular album, Works Volume 2, is not as good as Works Volume 1.
I agree.
It's got its moments on it, which I'm like, okay, I like this. There's some stuff on it that I'm not really into.
I'm like, there's probably a reason why this is more of a bonus disc rather than a finished product. Yeah.
Yeah, and then followed up with Love Beach.
Yeah, which we don't talk about. Yeah. Okay, moving on. The next one that I have, I don't have a record, and my CD is over there, but I do have the concert edition. So this is Ayreon's The Theater. This is the theater equation, but it's the human equation.
Okay.
So this one, back in high school, my buddy and I were trying to outdo one another by trying to find the weirdest song possible. And so he found 2 tracks off of this album, one that starts off with a didgeridoo, and another one that starts off with just this weird kind of pan flute, strange thing that goes straight into this like almost death metal. So are you familiar with Ayreon at all?
I think I've heard the name before, like I've heard it around, but I don't think I've heard any of the music.
Yeah, he he grabs talent from whoever's hot in the musical sphere at the time. So
Okay.
this one had James LeBray, Michael Eckefelt, Devin Townsend, Heather Findlay, um, and there's a whole bunch of other like really prominent prog metal artists
Okay.
that
Yeah.
come on to actually perform on here. And so the whole concept is this guy is in a coma and he's trying to figure out why he's there. And he finally realizes that he kind of committed suicide.
Yeah.
And while he's there, he's being helped out with the different facilities of emotions. So all
Mm.
these different prog singers come on to fill the role of a emotion.
Okay.
And it's a double disc concept album, and it still is one of my absolute favorite metal albums of all time.
Yeah. No, that sounds interesting. I'm digging that concept and all the
Yeah,
different
it's
singers on top.
yeah, it's so cool. And like I did a whole like half-hour video breakdown of why I love this album. But I love how all the singers, even though James LeBray has been kind of touted as not being the most strong metal
Yeah.
vocalist, I think he brings his A game in this. And his ability to just belt out some of the more like synthesized emotions is just brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a lot of people who aren't a fan of his kind of vocal style. I mean, I
Yeah,
think it works with Dream Theater
it
personally.
does. Yeah.
Um, big Dream Theater fan. I think they were one of the bands that kind of got me into prog in the first place, so I can't really complain.
Hmm.
But that does sound interesting. I mean, yeah, I love when artists will bring on loads of kind of other people on, and it makes it so much more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it was he kind of based his whole project off of like Jesus Christ Superstar, which it pained me not to include that on here, but it has that same kind of vibe where it tells a story through all these different singers.
Yeah, I like that. That sounds interesting. I'm definitely checking that out. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. And what's your next album? I think we're coming down to the final two.
Yeah. Going away from the kind of proggier side, but
Hmm.
definitely very much well known. Double White album.
Yep, yep.
Love
That made my short list, and it pained me to keep it off.
But big Beatles fan. I mean, I grew up on the Beatles and kind of um listened to more of their albums after watching Yellow Submarine because that's kind of like a childhood film for me.
Okay.
Uh, so I listened to like some of their albums, and this one took me a while to actually listen to all the way through because it's such a long album.
It is, yeah.
It took me so long to just actually listen to it just in one sitting. So I just decided one day I'm gonna sit down, I'm just gonna listen to the whole thing. And I did, and it just blew me away. And I love this side of the Beatles so much more than the kind of earlier stuff because you know
Hmm.
the experimentation. It's just such a varied album. You got such beautiful tracks, such interesting tracks, and I just big Beatles fan. I mean, what I don't really know what else to say. It's the Beatles. And
Yeah.
I actually learned while my guitar gently weeps through one of my guitar lessons.
Oh.
And me and my dad were having a conversation about what is the weakest track on this album.
Mhm.
And I couldn't really come up with an answer, but he came up with Revolution 9.
Oh man, that hurts.
I thought, well, it kind of adds something to the album,
It
though.
does, yeah. Yeah, and if Revolution number 9 isn't on there, then that final track of, is it Good Night?
Yeah.
Something like that. It wouldn't have that same kind of release. It wouldn't have that same kind of impactful, because it feels like you've just gone through this like almost hellscape that is this auditory odyssey. So once you're finally on the other side, you're like, it's that breath of fresh air.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it works so well with the album.
Yeah.
I just love that side of the Beatles so much. Like the just
Hmm.
back to crazy side. Let's just do whatever kind of
Yep.
side of the Beatles. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my favorite side of the Beatles. Like everything from like Sgt. Pepper's on is like my favorite album from them's probably Abbey Road, but like the White Album is a very, very close second.
My favorite is also Abbey Road, but close second for me is Magical Mystery Tour.
Oh yeah, that's
Absolutely.
hard.
I think it's a weirdly underrated one because it's kind of sandwiched in between.
It is, yeah, and I love that one, and I also love the soundtrack to the Yellow Submarine just for that second side. That's all instrumentals.
Yeah, that's great. I love that so much.
Hmm.
I love everything, Revolver onwards. I mean,
Yeah,
big
Same.
fan, and yeah, I think that was actually probably one of the first Beatles albums I heard, even before like Sgt. Pepper's and stuff like that. I was just like Abbey Road and Revolver way before I'd even probably heard of Sgt. Pepper's.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, Sgt. Pepper's was one of the last albums from them that I heard. Like I heard the hits, but I never actually sat down to listen to it. But yeah. All right. So the next album that I have, I don't have on CD or vinyl to show, but it's a band called Moon Safari with their double album of Blomljud.
I've heard the group, not heard the music.
Yeah, I believe they're Swedish. This is their second album, and this was what got me through some pretty dark times. And it also really helped prove to me that there's a lot of really talented music that was being put out at that time, because this was the late 2000s. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I haven't really heard any new bands out at this point. Like we've already gotten through Dream Theater and Porcupine Tree and Opeth, but they're all from like the 90s and early 2000s. At that point, I didn't hear anything from that. And I also felt like music at that point was too dark, too metal inclined. These guys were literally a beam of bright light. They're very poppy, very happy sounding. I keep saying they're like a celebration of music. And so it's a double disc, and the second disc has a 30-minute long song that just blows me away every single time.
Oh, that's interesting. I've definitely heard the name before. I think a lot of people have mentioned it, and I'm actually quite interested to listen to it.
Yeah, the thing that I love is like the Beatles, everybody sings. So there's a lot of 4-part harmonies.
Yeah.
That I'm just like it starts off with a purely a cappella track that then they use as the climax of the next song, which is like a 15-minute track.
Yeah. Big fan of the harmonies, so
yeah, it's one of my all-time favorites. So I think, is that all 5? Or did we have
I've got one more.
Okay, yeah, let's do one more. Because I still have one more as well.
So this is probably going to be an obvious choice, but I was really thinking about what do I put in here, because I was thinking putting in Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness of the Smashing Pumpkins, which is one of my favorite albums of the 90s.
That was my middle school. Yeah.
I got into that fairly recently, and I'm just a big fan of that, but I went with one that I'm more familiar with, that, and just Lamb Lies Down.
The Lamb Lies Down. Yeah,
just a great album. I think we covered that in the last video.
Yeah.
I don't really know what else more to say. Great concept, great album musically. I've been listening to more of that second side, so it's kind of been growing on me a lot more.
It does. It does.
It made me realize just how great of a band Genesis are. Like how great that kind of early period of Genesis was, and it blows me away. A lot of people actually don't like this album. Like I read in the comments, a lot of people don't actually like this album very much. There's a lot of fillers and stuff like that, but I just think all that kind of stuff just works with the whole idea of the album.
Yeah, like it's definitely the black sheep of the Peter Gabriel era, but there's something so special about it. Like it's an outlier for sure, but in like a very great way. Like as we mentioned, there hasn't been an album before or since that has come out like it.
Yeah, I mean, before this, it was like Nursery Crime, Selling England, or very kind of even Foxtrot, just very theatrical kind of albums. Like almost like not happy, but that kind of happy sounding.
Yeah.
And then you did Lamb Lies Down, which is like kind of darkish sound and just different types of vocals, different sound, everything, and it's just amazing.
Yeah, it's so good. Yeah. And unfortunately that one was another one that was in my short list that I couldn't put on. And so my last one is, I might be sitting behind it. Can I do it? No, I think I can. Okay, so this one's a very poppy 70s one, and I think my chair is in the way, but I might be able to do this. Oh no. Sorry. This is what I get for sitting behind my records. There we go. Okay. So it's Electric Light Orchestra's Out of the Blue.
That is a great album, that.
Yeah. Yeah, I have about another 5 albums as a short list that has like Steven Wilson's Grace for Drowning, Physical Graffiti, Snow by Spock's Beard, and Subterranean from IQ. But there's just something very special about this record that I love. And this was like my copy has I'm terrified to use it, but like the cutouts that you can make your
Oh,
little starship for.
oh yeah.
Um, yeah, I love the concerto for a rainy day that ends with Mr. Blue Sky,
Mhm.
and all the fun tracks like Turn to Stone and Jungle and Stepping Out. Like,
Yeah, that is a fantastic album.
yeah, it's hard to do that kind of poppy, fun music without being like sugar induced.
Mm.
And I love the compositions on this, and like Jeff Lynne was channeling something very special on this. Like a lot of the other albums that we've covered, it might not necessarily be my favorite ELO album, but it is one that I can consistently come back to.
Yeah, I think that they've definitely got a lot of proggy elements to their music, and I'm kind of drawn to that. But I obviously love things like Mr. Blue Sky and all that. But I think we got a copy of that album, but we have a picture disc version.
Oh, fun.
Does look very cool. And yeah, I think my favorite of the ELO stuff is still El Dorado, and that's
Mhm.
really good.
Yeah,
Very proggy in its way.
yeah, same. That's still my favorite. Like El Dorado is by far my favorite, followed by A New World Record. Like both of those are just fantastic. But I love just how happy and fun Out of the Blue can be.
Yeah, I love that kind of side of the 70s as well. Just the kind
Hmm.
of
Yeah,
just great. It's
it's
very
just
like
great.
well, it's like feel good kind of music. That's the word. Like
Hmm.
just really kind of sing along. Don't worry about anything. Just have fun.
Yeah, yeah, and I usually listen to it around spring anyway. Like the winter is gone, we're coming into more sunshine,
Yeah,
so yeah. Well, those are all the albums. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all those.
no problem. It's really fun. I mean, I had a very hard time trying to pick parts. Because as I said, I really wanted to put that Smashing Pumpkins record in there, but I just kind of I'll put Genesis in there instead.
Yeah, it's really hard, and like the 90s really didn't have a whole lot of double albums just because CDs and tapes were just so prevalent. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, if you wanted to do a longer album, you just put it on a CD. So,
yeah. I mean, I went with the kind of idea that was like, if it has 2 CDs of like full albums,
yeah.
then I'll put it in because I think that constitutes for a double album, really.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Excellent. Thank you again for coming on. If you haven't already, follow the Prog Nerd. I'll leave her channel down below in the description so you can do so. And hopefully we'll have you on again in the future.
yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to come back on, and if you want to come back onto to my channel, that'd be great fun as well.
Sure. Yeah. Sounds great. And thank you all so much for watching. As always, all of my viewers are definitely the best, only seconded by the Prog Nerds viewers. But I'm pretty sure we have a lot of overlaps. So,
Yeah, I think Ellen, this community is very tight, so
mhm,
watching each other.
yeah, best fans in the world. Um,
Absolutely.
so until next time, Notes and the Prog Nerd are out. Hooray.